And then I will go ahead right now and go to email. Where's the email? Go to mail. Then I will. Where are you at, Jeb? There you are, Jeb. Okay, I'm going to reply to you. I'm going to Command V. Okay, I'm going to send. That was at the top of the URL address then.
All right.
So I'm broadcasting right now. I guess people. So should I put that on Google Classroom?
I have like half the class's emails already, so we're good on that.
Okay, so you don't want me to put it on Google Classroom?
Yeah, probably next time.
So what about the other kids that you don't have their information from? They're out of luck.
Out of luck.
Right. I'm gonna put them on the. I'll just go put them on the other one anyway. So that's not gonna mess you up if I just post it as an announcement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it gonna mess you up?
Nope.
Okay.
All right. So that was a different week. It told me to create a video, but then you went to
I'm actually
create a new live event and all that, right?
Yeah, I did that. I'm actually. It says I'm broadcasting right now live. So let me try this. Okay, let me try this. Let me see if this works. So let me try this. Command copy. Let me try this one more time. I found a new link, but this is definitely not what it looked like before. So try this one. Yeah, that one. I show up in the picture when I just send it to you. So maybe that one's the right one.
Is loading. Yep, you show up in it.
All right, I'm there.
Yep.
All right, buddy. So then, how am I going to get the questions from you for on the Google Drive?
All right. So so people will be writing down questions in the live chat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll be
Is there a document you could
down on the document?
Okay, so are you going to share that document with me then right now?
Yep.
All right.
All right. So I'm gonna share the document right now.
It'll be great if this works, yeah.
Possibly we can use this for like all the tests.
Yeah, for sure. If it goes well.
Yeah.
Did you?
I'm sharing it right now.
Okay, just let me know when you are so I can refresh my thing. Uh-oh, I gotta go grab that. Hopefully I brought home the charger.
All right.
Oh, no.
I shared it with you right now.
All right, did you share it?
Yeah, I shared it with you right now.
Let me go grab it. I had to plug my computer's dying.
All right. Well, I'm gonna send out the link to everyone who I have.
All right. Okay. Yeah, Jeb. I got. All right. All right. So you have my phone number. If something happens, or I'll call you back to you. But if not, let's just get this thing going. Much easier, yeah. Did you? Wait,
It's really hard to see in his hair because his hair is so short.
Right. If you're joining right now, I'm waiting for Jeb to let me know when I can start. Some other people are going to be joining us too, so just hold tight until we get everybody logged in. I'll be back. All right. So, Jeb, real quick, if you can hear me, just text me up real quick, just so I know you can hear me. I'll start here in a sec. I'll give everybody a second. Or you can just type in the Google for the review questions. Doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to start. If you've missed the beginning, that's totally okay. I'm going to just kind of give an intro real quickly, and then we'll move on. It's probably good if you have your AP Protestant Reformation and Religious Wars concepts in front of you, so you can kind of point me to what concept you're talking about. Remember, guys, it's good to know about the people that I put on the review, but also the important part is that we need to answer the concept, and we need to pay attention to those people. So if you have a question and you know it's from 1.3.1a or something, please put 1.3.1a and then go ahead and ask your question so Jeb can forward it to me. So Jeb, whenever you're ready to go, and you get your first question, then please go ahead and type it on the Google Doc, and we can start going. Hopefully, people are joining us right now. Let me go check it out and see what we got. I got 15 viewers. See if I can get 16. 15 is not good. Probably off from period 5. No, just kidding, period 6. 17. So those of you who are joining right now, just please 18. All right. Go ahead and type up your question to Jeb so that he can copy and paste it to me so I can go ahead and answer it for you or let you know if it's important or not. Oh, we moved down to 16. We got to 18, then we went right back down to 16. Oh, back up to 18. All right. All right, here we go. 1.2.1b. All right. So, hey, so check it out. Good question. The importance of the Peace of Westphalia is 1.1 or 1.2.1b. So what we want to work with here, guys, is the Peace of Westphalia is the treaty. It's signed in Westphalia that ends the 30 Years' War. There's a couple other minor treaties that end the 80 Years' War, the one with Spain, right, and the Dutch Republic, but they all end around the same time. The important thing you need to know about this, and in fact, this will probably be in the next test, actually, but I'll tell you right now real quickly because I know Jeb's trying to get some questions down. Peace of Westphalia basically establishes this. You have something called the Dutch Republic. It's going to kind of be its own sovereign state now. The 7 provinces that broke off from from Spain's holdings during the 80-Year War create themselves a new kind of country called the Dutch Republic. The 10 provinces in the south are going to be called the Spanish Netherlands, and today we call that Belgium. A couple other countries get some autonomy or some sovereignty, Switzerland, and effectively what ends up happening is France is on the rise. France becomes the continental power of Europe, and Spain is in decline now after their golden age in which they discovered the New World and then brought back all the gold and riches from there. Let's see. The Holy Roman Empire is in tatters. 1/3 of the population is dead. The farmland is gone. The economy is gone because that's where the war was fought. So they are on the decline and they will be disunified. It stops the unification possibilities of the Holy Roman Empire all the way until the 1800s. Sweden's on the rise. Denmark's on the rise. They both were on the winning side. England is going to become the dominant, soon will become the dominant seafaring nation along with the Netherlands. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next unit. So that is the significance of the Peace of Westphalia. It pretty much ends this stuff. 1.3.1a. Who was? I don't. Yeah. Thanks, Noah. You tell me. I have no idea who the guy is. To be honest with you, I've never heard the guy's name. I didn't even bother to look him up. So he wasn't anybody that was important before. I do know that in terms of, let me find it right here. 1.3. Let me go find it. In terms of what my best guess is he is another example of somebody employing Renaissance learning in order to have religious reform. Remember, the Christian humanists are humanists, right? They're humanists like the Italian humanists, but the purpose of their education, the purpose of looking at the books, the Bible, and the scholarly writings of the church is to become a better Christian. It's to become a better person and human through your Christianity. So my guess is he makes up he's a good example, just like Sir Thomas More and Erasmus are, of Christian humanism. Let's go back here. 21 viewers. Well, that's not bad. It's worth it. All right, let's go. Any other questions? Go ahead and fire some questions to Jeb, and he will try and get them up.
I'm very disappointed in you. You're not being a good listener.
Good. 1.3.3a. 1.3.3a. Good. Issues of religious reform exacerbated exacerbated, excuse me, conflicts between the monarchy and the nobility, as in the French Wars of Religion. So again, some of you guys were asking a question, which is a good question. And please ask it in class. I mean, we can always turn these statements into questions by adding a what, a who, a where, a why. So in this case, what were the religious reforms that created conflicts between the monarchy and the nobility? So what are some of the reforms that are happening that are going to create this type of conflict? So let's go back here. What was the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre? All right, so what was the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre? So this, looking at our concept 1.3.3a, St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre was an event that occurred when remember, we have three different factions in France. We have the Bourbons in Navarre, the region of Navarre in France. They are Protestant Calvinists. We have the monarchy, which is the Valois family, and we have the ultra-Catholic Guise family, who are really tied with the Pope. You don't need to know so much what happens with it. You just need to know kind of how that plays into the story of creating the conflict. The religious reform was perhaps to stop different factions from attempting to take the throne. Catherine de' Medici obviously is the mother of the people on the throne, and she is attempting to stop people from trying to overthrow her family. To do this, oh, by the way, just side note, she is a good example of politique. Politique is Machiavellian. It's pragmatic. It's the idea that religion shouldn't be the very first and only reason why you do anything as a statesperson, as a diplomat, as a king. You should be very Machiavellian, and you should look at the real circumstances here. And the real circumstances for Catherine de' Medici was that, hey, listen, we need to kind of calm the violence down. And how she attempts to do this is through a marriage to the Bourbons. Long story short, some Catholics get killed. In retribution for this, Catherine de' Medici has 20,000 Huguenots, which are French Calvinists, killed, which is the trigger event for something called the War of the Three Henrys. So it's Henry Guise, Henry Bourbon, and Henry Valois are the leaders of each of the families, and they go to war. That's it. Let's see, 1.3.2a, what was the Spanish Inquisition? Good, so the Spanish, let me find it, 1.3.2a, 1.3.2. Hey, awesome. So this question is the concept. Monarchs and princes, such as the English rulers, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, initiated religious reform from the top down in an effort to exercise greater control over religious life and morality. In Spanish Inquisition, obviously, is in Spain. It is an event that takes place that helps to solidify that Catholicism is going to be the main religion of Spain. The monarchs in Spain they have already expelled all the Moors and the Jews and anybody who's not Catholic. And this isn't an attempt to make sure that there's no other outsiders, if you will, no other outsiders inside of Spain, so that Spain can remain Catholic and move on there. Again, it's tied to the new monarchs. That's something that a new monarch would do to try to control the religion of a nation. In this case, they're trying to push out anybody and everybody that is not Catholic. Today, Spain's Catholic. Tomorrow, Spain's Catholic. Back then, Spain's Catholic. They're always going to be Catholic. Hopefully I answered that question good. Cool, let's move on. What was the significance of the nobles in Poland? Okay, we are going to cover that, guys. Precious, don't sweat that. They will show up in our next unit. So we won't cover that tonight. So you don't have to worry about that for the test tomorrow. I'm going to move on. What was the Edict of Nantes again? Good. The Edict of Nantes, that was 1.3.3d. 1.3.3d. A few states, such as France, with the Edict of Nantes, allowed religious pluralism in order to maintain domestic peace. Edict of Nantes is a very important document and event that happens in European history. Again, this is very Machiavellian. This is very politique. It's very realpolitik when you look at real circumstances. The King Henry Bourbon, that won the War of the Three Henrys, is now going to be the King of France. He is a Calvinist. He is not a Catholic. Paris, the city of Paris, which is the metropolitan, if you would call a metropolitan area at the time, has the most population and whatnot. It is a very Catholic city, and it is the main city inside of France. Being a politic, being Machiavellian, Henry Bourbon, Henry IV of Navarre, decides that there's no way that he can put down a rebellion or stop the people of Paris from maybe trying to overthrow him if he's a Calvinist. So he decides to convert to Catholicism. Again, he's a Calvinist. Why does he do this, though? He does it because he's very pragmatic. He's trying to hold the throne. He converts to Catholicism, and he says Paris, the city of Paris in France, is worth a mass. Mass being the sermon, or the when you go to church as a Catholic, it's called Mass. So Paris is worth a mass. So he's going to become Catholic. Now, if he just turns and becomes Catholic, I mean, he's leaving a whole bunch of people there that are going to be pretty upset. And those are going to be the French Calvinists, the Huguenots, one of which he is. So what he decides to do is he decides to give the Huguenots some freedoms as well. He gives them religious toleration. They can practice their Calvinist beliefs without the state getting involved in their religions. They're allowed to fortify their towns. They're allowed to kind of create little tiny militias, for protection in their towns. So he tries to pacify both the Catholics and the French Calvinist Huguenots by passing this Edict of Nantes. And again, religious pluralism is when you have many religions inside of a country that are okay to practice. Okay, so in this case, it's the Huguenots, the Calvinists, and it's the Gallican Church, which is the French Catholics. Cool. Let's move on. What was the Spanish Armada? One of the keys on the test. Good. Guys, Spanish Armada it was the name of the Spanish Navy. Up until this point, again, this is kind of hard because we have to bounce around, guys. And this is what I was talking about in class. There's no easy way to do this. Next unit, we are going to go back to 1492. I know we're in 1648, but we're going to bounce all the way back to 1492. And in 1492, Christopher Columbus discovers America. I know he didn't, but right, that's what they thought at the time. And due to that, Spain becomes very rich and very powerful, and they end up having the largest and strongest navy, which is called the Spanish Armada. It's just the name given to all of the navy of Spain, in which they controlled the seas. During the 80 Years' War, the Spanish Armada of Philip II tries to go up and put down a rebellion, the one we talked about in the Dutch Republic, and along the way they intend to hurt, harm, or disable the English Navy. The history books say some kind of weird storm hit the, I don't know, what was it called, the Protestant wind, because it favored the Protestants, and a lot of these Spanish ships got destroyed in a gnarly storm, and the English were able to take care of the rest of the ships. And from that point on, England is going to become the major seafaring country of the world, all the way up until the 1800s. They're going to control pretty much what happens on the water, right? They don't have a large army. They're an island. So that's what the Spanish Armada is. Good. 1.2.1a. What did Ferdinand and Isabella do specifically to consolidate power with the military? Good question. In terms of what we need to know, it's just a good example. On the test, what you might see is a document that was written, and it's escaping me right now, in which the military forces of Spain were to be put under the control of Ferdinand and Isabella. In effect, they took the power of the nobles and gave it to themselves for controlling this military. But other than that, you wouldn't need to know much. It's just an example. All right, let's see. 1.3.3a, the importance of Catherine de Medici. Again, Catherine de Medici is an example of politique. Politique is being Machiavellian. Again, I know I keep repeating that, but it's super important that you all understand that this is a turning point in the way statesmen, women, diplomats are going to act from now on. They are going to be very pragmatic. They're going to be very Machiavellian. They are going to start to put the interest of the state in front of the interest of their religion, if you will. And Catherine de Medici is just one good example of that. So that's all you would really need to know with her. 1.3.38, no, 1.3.1b. What was nepotism and absenteeism? Awesome. Nepotism happens today. I mean, it shouldn't, but it does. Nepotism is the act of putting close family members, maybe even friends, in important positions inside of an organization. Let's look at today's world. We have President Trump. There have been very few presidents that have had close family members actually be inside of the government. The one exception would be John F. Kennedy. His brother Bobby was the the Attorney General, and people of the time back in the 60s thought that was crazy, that you shouldn't have family members there. Now today, President Trump has his brother-in-law and his daughter as advisors inside of the White House. That's kind of what nepotism is. So in terms of AP European history, nepotism is the idea that cardinals, popes, high church officials would put people, their cousins, their brothers, their uncles, in important positions inside of the church, in high-ranking positions, simply because they were their family. Doesn't mean they were good for the job. Doesn't mean they could even do the job well. Didn't even mean they even wanted the job. They probably were just, getting the job to be rich. So when you have nepotism, you run the risk of people being in positions that aren't qualified for a position, A, and B, they might only solely be doing it for money, and they could be easily corrupt because they weren't put there for the right reasons, if you will. So that's nepotism. Absenteeism is kind of what it sounds like. It's when people, it's kind of like pluralism. I mean, pluralism was the idea that popes or not popes, but priests had multiple jobs, or they covered multiple cities inside of a region, and they wouldn't always be in the same town to lead mass or anything. They kind of bounced from one place to the next, and thus probably getting a little bit more wealthy, because instead of having one town to look over, they were looking over three, and you get 3 times the money from the indulgences and stuff like that. So absenteeism is you having a church office in which you actually you're absent from. Absenteeism. Okay, who was St. Teresa Avila? Okay, Crystal, let's go here. St. Teresa Avila, she falls under, where is she? I know she's in here somewhere. Good. The Catholic Reformation, exemplified by the Jesuits and the Council of Trent, revived the church but cemented the divisions within Christianity. St. Teresa of Avila was a nun. She actually brought forth the idea that you can have a personal relationship with God outside of church. You can do this through your spirituality, through your praying, and you could actually have that relationship. Why that is important is it's kind of new. If you think about it, the Catholic Church up until that point would have told you, you've got to go to church, you've got to do A, B, C, and D to have a relationship with God. She's kind of going outside of that. It's a little bit more Martin Lutherish, if you will, although it's not that far. I mean, she doesn't go God, faith, Bible, and you don't need to go to church or anything like that. She doesn't go that far, but she still is important because she's stressing the idea that you and I can have this personal relationship, just like Luther would say, with God, through praying, and that praying probably doesn't have to take place in a church. Okay, good question though. So a good example of the Catholic Reformation. Remember the Reformation, guys, there is the affirmation and the Reformation. So what do the Catholics affirm and what do they reform? Those are the things you need to remember for the test. Okay, what was the Concordat or Bologna? All right, that was 1.3.2a, 1.3.2a. Awesome. Again, it's just another example of a monarch, a new monarch, trying to consolidate power with himself, to centralize power under himself in a country. The country is France, and what the monarch was attempting to do was to have more direct control over Catholicism inside of France. He makes a deal with the Pope that says, listen, you're still going to get paid. The church, we didn't talk much about this, guys, but look, in all these countries that are Catholic, the Catholic Church holds large, vast amount of land. They own land all over the place. And they collect taxes on this land. And this is one way that the Catholic Church, especially in Rome, becomes really wealthy, is through this land holding. So this deal that the French monarch makes with the Pope is that the Pope is still going to get his money. He's still going to have control over that land and reap the benefits of the taxes and whatnot. But the king is going to have direct say over who is hired to be the important positions of the church. The Pope won't have those final say. The king will. And so the king has the ability, nepotism, to put family members in important positions. He has the ability to put friends in these important positions. And once, if you're the king's friend, the king's family, you're probably going to carry out the king's wishes in terms of what he wants to happen from a religious standpoint inside of your country, thus giving him more control, centralizing power under himself. That's the goal of the new monarchs, to centralize his power. What was the significance of all the Philips? Oh, good Lord, that's too long. The Philips guys are Habsburgs. They are in Spain. Let me find it here. The efforts of the Habsburgs rulers, this is 1.3.3b, rulers failed to restore Catholic unity. These guys all from Charles I, Philip II, Philip III, Philip IV. They all attempt to restore or to redo the Catholic Reformation. Their goal, each of them individually, building upon each other, is to take the status quo. Well, status quo is a bad word. Their goal is to take the gains by the Protestants during the Protestant Reformation and the signing of the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, which granted religious freedom to Lutherans, princes, if they would like to be. And they want to turn that around. They want to go back and re-Catholicize Europe. King Charles V wants to re-Catholicize the Holy Roman Empire. His brother Ferdinand, he's the guy who starts the 30 Years' War, right? And that's what his job is. He's going up and he goes to Bohemia, where he does, and his boys go up to Bohemia and says, "Hey, listen, we would like you guys to reconvert back to Catholicism," and they won't do it, and thus starts the 30 Years' War. Philip II attempts to do this in the Netherlands. That's the 80 Years' War, or at least the beginning of the 80 Years' War. Philip II attempts to reestablish Catholicism, and then Philip III and Philip IV continue that all the way through the 30 Years' War. They are getting in these wars in order to weaken the Protestants, and essentially also weaken France, in order to get rid of Protestantism and make Europe Catholic again. All right, who were the Huguenots? Good. The Huguenots were French Calvinists. So that's just the name they were given. So in England, not next unit, but the unit after that, we'll talk about the Puritans. The Puritans are Calvinist as well. They're a sect of Calvinists. In France, they were just called Huguenots. So French Calvinists, they're Protestants. How did the 1.2.1a, how did new monarchs suppress the clergy for more power? Good question. Let me go over here. Where are we at? That's 1.2.1a. Good. From what we need to know, the new monarchs, I think I just talked about the Concordat or Bologna. That is the religious example of a new monarch doing that. In England, with Henry VIII, he establishes the church, the Anglican Church, which is a Protestant church. He breaks from the Catholic Church, and he passes something called the Act of Supremacy, which makes him the supreme leader of the Anglican Church inside of England. That's another good example of a specific example of a new monarch taking control of a religion. Those are probably your two best examples of that. And the other ones, Peace of Augsburg and the Eastern Nantes, are more examples of politique. I hope that I answered that question. What was the Star Chamber? Okay, good. Star Chamber, guys, again, is, let me find it, 1.2.1a. New monarchies laid the foundation for a centralized modern state that we have today by establishing a monopoly. They controlled tax, they controlled the military, they dispensed justice, and they gained the right to determine the religion of their subjects. So the Star Chamber in this concept refers to specifically the dispensing of justice. So again, if you're looking at, hopefully you are, looking at your concepts, 1.2.1a, new monarchies laid the foundation for centralization of the modern state by, skip down a little bit, it's going to say the dispensing of justice. So the Star Chamber was a court system in which you could be brought up, a noble, remember we're talking about new monarchs centralizing power. How do they do that? Well, they take control of the religion. They take control of the military. They tax the nobles and others so that they can pay for the military. And then they get to determine how justice is dispensed. The Star Chamber is simply a vehicle. It's the apparatus in England through which the king, the Tudors, dispense justice. You can be brought up on any crime, and when you are brought in front of the Star Chamber, you don't have the right to, witnesses. You barely have the right to defend yourself. When you get brought before the Star Chamber, the king's courts are going to find you guilty if that's what they're trying to do, find you guilty. So once the king has control of this courts and you can be found guilty, how many nobles are going to stand up and get and talk back to the king? Because if they do, they're going to be brought up on charges in front of the Star Chamber. They could be punished and put in jail. They could be executed. They could lose their land. And this becomes a way for the English monarchs to terrorize the nobility in order to weaken them, thus making them, the Tudors, the monarchy, more powerful. Again, just an example of how new monarchs control nobility. What is penance? 1.1. I don't think, Precious, I don't think that's terribly important. 1.3, yeah, that's not that important, so I'm going to skip that one. Sorry. If you want to talk to me at school, we can talk. 1.3.1c, who were the Jesuits and what did they order? Tacos? I don't know. Pizza? I don't know what they ordered. The Jesuits. That was that a good joke? Yes, no? No? Okay. 1.3.1c. By the way, don't be saying anything funny about my glasses. I can't read without them. 1.1. Let me find this one. 1.1. Okay, 1.3.1c. I can't find it right now. Where is it? Okay, Jesuits. 1.3.1c. Let's go find it. 1.3.1c. Oh, good. The Jesuits. Good. The Catholic Reformation, exemplified by the Jesuit order and the Council of Trent, revived the church but cemented the divisions. This is that question in Tom Ritchie's video where he talks about the affirmation versus the Reformation. The Jesuits are on both sides of this. They affirm Catholicism. They are the popes or God's warriors. They are going to fight. They will be called to fight against Protestantism, and they will do that. But at the same time, they're reformers because they are a very good example of education during this time period. They set out to create monasteries for priests to be educated in order to kind of clear up that problem with having illiterate priests being more educated. They create schools. In fact, the Jesuit order goes all over the world, and the Jesuits will missionize and try to convert people from foreign lands, they would call them heathens, who are mono or polytheistic, into the monotheistic religion of Catholicism, and they will establish schools all over the place. In California, a school that you might apply to is Loyola Marymount. It's Loyola is named after Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who is a Spaniard who founds the Jesuit order. It's a Jesuit college. So again, they reform the Catholic Church through education, and they affirm the Catholic religion through missionizing and through fighting people that are disagreeing with Catholicism. So that's that. How did Catholic Spain and Protestant England exploit religious conflicts to promote political and okay? So this is going to be a longer answer because Catholic Spain and Protestant England are both involved in the 80 Years' War and the 30 Years' War, and to an extent the other wars. But let's just kind of stick to that. So let's stick to the 80 Years' War with England. So England notices that there's a fight between the Catholic Spain and the Netherlands. England's Protestant, the Netherlands Protestant. They side with the Protestants, but it's not so much to side with the Protestants because they are Protestant. What they're attempting to do is weaken Spain, because Spain at this time is the #1 naval power. They have the Spanish Armada, and it's in England's political and economic interest to weaken Spain so that maybe England can become the dominant power on the sea. So they get into this not so much for religious reasons, but for political and economic reasons. Not the next unit, but the unit after that, you will see that actually England goes to war with the Netherlands after they've helped them, because the Netherlands has a pretty strong navy and they have a very vast trade network as well. And again, England goes to war with them, even though they've already helped them once. But again, they go to war because they want to weaken the Netherlands so that they can maintain the strength as being the strongest navy, the strongest trading power in the world. And that's an economic and political benefit for England in this case. So they exploited that war, the religious war between the Catholics and the Protestants, between the Netherlands and Spain, in order to politically and economically enhance their position inside of Europe. Hopefully that makes sense. Protestant Catholic Spain does the same in the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War was primarily fought, or it began as a religious war between the Catholics, Ferdinand II, Catholic Holy Roman Empire, and the Protestants inside of the Holy Roman Empire. But Spain enters it in order to weaken France politically and economically, and to help maintain the Habsburg family, and to get certain pieces of land that they feel they're entitled to, which would make them wealthier and stronger. So again, it's people looking at a situation, a country, and saying, oh, wow, these guys are fighting each other. Can I politically or economically enhance my country, my position, by entering this war? And if I can, whose side should I enter on? And hopefully it's the winning side. Spain, losing side. So it doesn't work out real well for them. Further explanation of the Jesuits. I'll move on. Who were the specific people that took power from the nobility, and what did they do with this power? Shawan, I don't know, buddy. I don't think we can spend the time going into each individual. Let me find this. What is it? It's 1.3.3a. Let me find it real quick. Make sure I'm 1.3.3a. Nope, that's not it. Let me go back. 1.3.3. Who are the specific people that took power from the nobility? Well, the specific people were Henry VIII did this. Henry VII did this. Let me find some. Ferdinand and Isabella did this. Philip II did this. Every new monarch is fighting the nobility. Remember in class I talked about that feudal pyramid? Well, at the top, guys, was the nobility and the church and the king. And the kings, for the most part, didn't have a whole bunch of power before this time period, right? We talked about the idea that if you're a king and you want to go to war in the 1400s and the 1300s, you have to go to the nobles and ask permission to use their military to help you go expand your power base. You have no power. You don't have your own military. So each of these monarchs, these new monarchs, and every monarch from here are going to try to expand their power by centralizing the power. If you're centralizing the power, you're taking it from somebody. The only people who have power are the Catholic Church and the nobility. So each of these monarchs in their own way are trying to grasp power from the nobility or from the church. The Concordat of Dawn of Bologna was an example in France of a new monarch taking power from the church. The Star Chamber was an example of Henry, I think it's Henry VII and into Henry VIII and whatnot, of them establishing a court system that actually takes power away from the nobility. So the specific people I don't think you need to know. I would just say that each of these, the Tudor family, the Habsburg family, the in Spain, the Holy Roman Empire in Austria, the Valois, and now the Bourbon family in France are all attempting to do this. So any king or queen that falls under these lines are going to be people that are going to do that very thing, take power from the church or the nobility. Okay, who has been in it? Who or what was it? Okay, yeah, so Melanie, 1.3.1c. Let me find it, 1.3.1c. The Ursulines are another example. Remember our, get some water here. Remember, this specific concept is the Catholic Reformation, exemplified by the Jesuits and the Council of Trent, revived the church, brought it back, but also cemented divisions. So they reformed some things and they affirmed some things. The Ursulines are a good example of the Reformation, not the affirmation. They did something different. They established schools. Education is a very humanist thing. It's a very Protestant thing. So they are reforming the Catholic Church from a standpoint of religion. They establish their nuns. They establish schools for girls, wealthier girls, obviously, and other schools. So that's who the Ursulines are. They're a good example of the Reformation that the church underwent. If you have to say that the church, to what extent did the church reform itself? My guess would be they kind of did. How did they do it? They did it through the Ursulines, who established education and schooling for girls. They did it through St. Teresa of Avila, in which they started to be okay with the idea that you could have a personal relationship with God through your prayer and not necessarily have that happen at church. They did that through reducing the indulgences. They kept them, but they kind of tried to mellow them a little bit. Those are the things they did to kind of reform. Then on the other side, the things they did to cement the division. Right now, what did they do to basically affirm Catholicism and basically say, screw you to the Protestants? Well, they created the Roman Inquisition. They created the Index of Prohibited Books, in which any book that was written by a Protestant, especially Martin Luther and Calvin and those guys, were outlawed and burned, so that only people would have the availability through their education would be to read, Catholic books. They kept to the 7 sacraments. Hey, we have 7 sacraments. We don't have 3 like Luther's trying to borrow you into. So they stuck to their guns on many things. So again, St. Teresa and the Ursulines are good examples, and even the Jesuits are pretty good examples of a little bit of reform that they did. But the Roman Inquisition, the Index Books of Prohibited Books, the Council of Trent, and all those things I mentioned are really good examples of the way they just say, hey, screw you to the Protestants, right? This is who we are. We're not going to change our religion for you. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, how were the German sovereign states governed after the destruction of the Holy Empire? So good question. You don't need to know this, but essentially each of these states was governed by a family. They're a noble family. And each of these noble families, this is going forward, guys. So each of these noble families are going to actually pick sides in wars. They're going to create treaties with other states and other countries in order to enhance their strength, enhance the size of their region or state, enhance the wealth of their region or state. And going forward, the region inside of the Holy Roman Empire that is the single most successful are the Prussians. They're located in the northeastern part by Poland. The Prussians will basically pick sides in wars that are going to come up, and they're going to be on the winning side almost all the time. And due to this, they're going to get more power, more wealth, and more land. And as they do that, they become the dominant German state. Eventually, when Germany in the 1800s, I believe it's 1871, I think, becomes Germany, it's going to be under the Prussians. The Prussians are going to finally create a unified German state. So it's just independent rulers like they were before. What is good? Centralization, guys. Centralization is the act of trying to consolidate or bring in power under one group or person. In this case, it's the monarchy. It's the king, Henry VIII. And what they do to do that, when think about a country, there's a finite, which means not infinite, finite amount of power that can be dispensed inside of a country. That power up until this point has been shared by the Catholic Church, the nobility, the noble families that have their big, large tracts of land that are invested in the government. And these people only want to benefit themselves. They don't care about, they don't have an allegiance to England or France. They have an allegiance to their family. They have an allegiance to get their family more powerful and more wealthy. Because frankly, if the king is weak, you as a noble family might be able to overthrow that king. And guess what? You become king. Now you go from noble to king. So centralizing power is just this. There's that finite amount of power. You have to, if you're a king and you want to control everything, you have to take the power from somebody. So who do you take it from? The only people that have power in that country, that's the Catholic Church, and that's the nobles. And they do that through various methods. Star Chamber in England, Concordat or Bologna in France, controlling the military in Spain. What's the one I'm missing? Whatever the other one was in terms of that one concept. So those are all examples of centralizing power to bring power under the control of one person or family. None of these new monarchs are successful to the point where they control everything. They're not like Hitler. They don't control everything in their country. Eventually, some kings will. The king who comes closest to this is a Bourbon king. He's Louis XIV. He is the grandson of Henry IV, the guy who just won the War of Three Henrys, who's trying to consolidate power himself. But he's going to be the best example of that. And those rulers will not be called new monarchs. They will be called absolute rulers or absolute monarchs. Absolute meaning they control absolutely everything. So from here on out, every king, every monarch in Europe is going to try through the methods of the new monarchs, controlling the church, controlling the taxes, controlling the military, controlling the court, controlling society, is going to try to become an absolute ruler. Most will fail. Well, I wouldn't say most. Some will fail and some will be successful. That's a unit that we will talk about in a month. Okay, that'll be absolute rulers. I hope that's central. Hey, 1.3.3a. How was Catherine? Who was? I already talked about her, Rita. So if you want to go back and play this, I already talked about her, so I'm going to skip that. Gustavus Adolphus, guys. Gustavus Adolphus is a Swedish prince or king from Sweden. He enters the 30 Years' War. He is an example. Let me find the concept. So the concept is religious conflicts. No. Where do we find? Okay, here we go. Outside states exploited religious conflicts to promote political and economic interests. That's 1.3.3c. So in this case, Gustavus is a Swedish king who enters the 30 Years' War in an attempt to stop the Catholics from winning. In the 30 Years' War, you don't need to know this. There's 4 phases. One's called the Swedish phase, and the Swedes enter on the side of the Protestants, and they do so. I mean, he does technically a little bit because he's Protestant, and he wants the Catholics to stop, but he also wants to gain land for Sweden in the northern part of Germany. That's his other political motive. And by getting more land, that gets you more political power, and that gets you more economic power. So Gustavus Adolphus enters on the side of the Protestants, and his significance is with his army and himself and his military generals, they stop the Catholics. The Catholics kind of won the first phase, and they started to win the second phase. But when the Swedish came in, they stopped them and kind of reversed it. And from that point on, the Swedes entering, the Catholics will end up losing the battle because France will join and cause some more problems for the Catholics. Gustavus Adolphus, Sweden. All right, 1.3.2c, importance and what were Puritan. Don't worry about the Puritans, Ayub. They are in England. We're not going to talk about them until we talk about the English Civil War. But the Puritans are the people, they're Calvinists. We talked about the Protestant work ethic. They're very pious in nature. They don't sing. They don't dance. If you guys ever watched the movie Footloose, I think they have a new one that came out a couple years ago. Those people in that town did not sing, did not dance. They just went to church. Those guys are Puritans. Puritans are going to be the people who found the New World for England. So the Puritans are the people who came over on the Mayflower in the big moving truck that came across the sea. And Plymouth Rock, those are Puritans. They are English Calvinists. 1.3.2a, what was the significance? Book of Common Prayer is an attempt by, this is another new monarch thing. This is an attempt by Henry VIII and later on Elizabeth I, his daughter, to control the religion inside of England. Remember, at this time, the English had been Catholic until Henry VIII breaks from the Catholic Church, creates the Act of Supremacy, makes himself a Protestant and the head of the Anglican Church. They create a book, basically, well, his chancellors do, that outlines the way Mass or church is going to be done inside of England. It's just kind of a how-to book with laws and regulations in terms of religion. It's their attempt to centralize power, take it from the Pope, take it from the church, and give it to themselves. The Book of Common Prayer. After the religious wars, would new monarchs invade other countries? Yes, good question. That we won't talk about that, whoever that was. They will. The Louis inside of France are going to start to invade the Netherlands. They're going to invade the Holy Roman Empire. Most of these countries are going to try to invade each other, create treaties that are in an attempt to enhance, to heighten their political power and their economic power. So yes, these new monarchs will start to turn on themselves, and then we will start to have real political wars where you have a real country, it's France, going against a real country, the Dutch Republic, or you will have, Spain going against France. So yes, that will happen, but that is a further unit. Thomas More is another good example of the concept. 1.3.1a, Christian humanism embodied in the writings of Erasmus employed Renaissance learning in the service of religious reform. So Sir Thomas More was the guy we talked about who wrote that book Utopia about that perfect place that you could live in which society had very few problems. And the main idea of this essentially is the idea that these Christian humanists were supporting and advocating the idea of education for people, especially Christian education, in an attempt to make them more moral, make them have better lives, and thus live in some sort of utopia, if you will. And that was the book Sir Thomas More wrote. Again, if you want to know the main idea and plot, you can, after this, go to, I believe it's Spark Notes, and search for Utopia, and there'll be a 2-paragraph or 3-paragraph outline of really what the book is. And I believe I've read it in the past. They might even connect it to Christian humanism. So again, Spark Notes online, Utopia, Sir Thomas More, and you can probably find some more information about that. Simony, guys, it's drawing a blank. My brain's starting to go under here, guys. Let me see if I can figure this out. I remembered it, but it's just dying here. Oh yeah, good. The buying and selling of privileges. So it's the buying and selling of ecclesiastical, which is church privileges, like pardons and stuff like that. It's kind of like indulgences. So simony. Index of prohibited books. I already talked about that earlier. So if you joined later, you can just go ahead, I think, and replay this, and you can find that. After religious wars, did countries start to adopt nationality and embrace the idea? All right. After religious wars, did countries start to? Yes, very slowly. We are still in the 16th and 17th centuries. We are just now in the 17th century starting to have people think of themselves maybe more as French or English. They're not there yet, though. As opposed to like, hey, I'm from Marseille, and it's in France, or hey, I'm from Nice, that's in France, or hey, I'm from the region of whatever, Paris. But yeah, when these new monarchs start to centralize power and they start to do that, one way they attempt to control the population is through an idea of national identity. Like, hey, we're all France. They figure it's an easier way to control the population. It won't be until the 18th century that this stuff starts to really shine through with the French Revolution, and into the 19th century, there will be a bunch of revolutions that take place in which the people, through Enlightenment ideals, overthrow monarchies under the name of the French people, the English people, the whatever, the Polish people. So yes, national identities are starting to formulate now, but I would say that no, most people don't think of themselves as French at this point. And obviously not in the Holy Roman Empire. It's not even a country, right? They're totally backwards there. And in Italy, they're not a country either. So you wouldn't have ever thought of yourself as Italian in this time period. Clarification on the heretics. All right, let's go. Heretics are people who say and do and act against the church. So in this case, the Catholic Church, Martin Luther is a heretic. He is attempting to talk bad. He's attempting to break from. He's attempting to change Catherine doctrine and belief. He's a heretic. So anybody who's against that, witches would be heretics. Martin Luther, John Calvin, heretics. All those guys would be considered heretics. How did states exploit religious conflict, and what did they? Jeb, I don't understand the one question. 1.3.3c. How did states exploit religious conflicts, and what did they again? What did they do again? Maybe I'll skip that one. Move down. Where was the standing of the Italian city-states during the religious war? Great. The city-states are still, in fact, we'll get back to Italy, but just know that the Habsburgs control the southern part of Italy, Sicily, and from Naples all the way south into the boot. Italy's the country looks like a boot. The Habsburgs are going to control that, and eventually the Bourbons will take it over in a war. So they are actually controlled by outside countries. In the middle, where Rome is the Papal States, and the Pope politically controls that area. It's not just what we consider the Vatican today. It's outside. It's Rome, and it's a larger piece of land. But he's both the temporal spiritual leader and the political leader of that area. Venetia and Milan are in the north. I believe the Habsburgs control those two pieces of land. So it's actually foreign countries and rulers who control most of Italy during this time. How did the Spanish Inquisition affect society? Well, it brought terror to them. In the Roman Inquisition or the Spanish Inquisition, you could be turned in by your neighbors. Maybe, and again, so specifically, it was to root out people that weren't Catholic. In Spain, well, it would be, hey, if you were a Moor or Muslim, because the Moors and Muslims had controlled Spain in the years before, or if you were Jewish. But yeah, if you converted from Judaism to Catholicism to stay in Spain because, say, you had some business holdings there and your neighbors didn't like you, they just had to go to the authorities and say, yeah, you know what? They're still practicing Jews. And the authorities would show up. And whether you were, even if you weren't, you were probably going to be arrested, and you were probably going to be taken to some dungeon, and you'd probably be tortured and perhaps killed in an attempt to find out who your friends were. So this established a fearful society. We will see this happen again in the French Revolution, and we will see this happen again under Nazi Germany, in which neighbors turn in neighbors, sons and daughters turn in parents, simply because they don't like them. They make things up and say, hey, they're enemies of the state. So it established some fear in these countries. Nepotism. Clarification is just the nepotism, guys. Again, you can rewatch it, but it's just the idea that you're going to put your friends and family members in important positions. If I were to become the president of the United States in 3 years, God forbid, right? Yeah. And I'm the Secretary of State, very important position. I'd make my wife the Secretary of State. I'd make my son the Secretary of Defense. I'd make my daughter the Secretary of Lollipops. Whatever. It's me putting my friends and family in important positions inside of a government. That's just nepotism. Or it could just be an organization, right? It could just be in family-run businesses, right? So you start your own business. You put your sons and daughters as the CEO, the CFO, and all of that. That's nepotism. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just that's what nepotism is. All right, 1.3.2c. Who were the Puritans? We already talked about that. Sorry, not important for this test, but you can go back and figure that out. Importance of Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I is the daughter of King Henry the Eighth of England. She comes to the throne after Henry dies. Oh my God, how's this work? Good Lord, too many Henrys. Henry dies. Henry, his son, comes to the throne, but dies really quickly. Then his sister, daughter, somebody named Mary, who's a Catholic, comes to power because she's the closest family. And so she attempts to undo all of the stuff that the Protestants, the Anglican, Henry VIII had done, and I think it's this, I don't know who the next Henry is, had done. But she doesn't live very long. She dies, and the next person in line to the throne is Elizabeth I, who's a Protestant. So she reestablishes Protestantism inside of England. She will show up, I think, maybe next test or the test after that. I don't think she'll show up. But again, she's a good example of a politique. She makes some deals with the Catholics inside of her country to kind of make them feel more at ease with what's going on in the country in order to stop a rebellion, perhaps. What was the Dutch? Oh, good. God, religious pluralism is an important word. Again, religious pluralism is the idea that you have multiple religions inside of a country, and it's totally okay. It's an example of religious toleration. So the Edict of Nantes in France is an example of religious toleration. Both the Huguenots and the Catholics supposedly were to live in peace because they both had rights. What really happened isn't that, right? The Huguenots and the Catholics actually continued to fight. Eventually, the Edict of Nantes will be revoked by Louis XIV, who is Henry IV's grandson, and he will try to reassert absolute power in France by revoking that edict and saying you have to be Catholic in this country. In the Dutch Republic, after these wars becomes the Netherlands, the Dutch Republic, and then they'll become the Netherlands. They become a very religious, plural country. They are the best example of religious toleration. If you're Jewish, you can go to the Dutch Republic. They're cool with you. If you're Calvinist, they're fine with you. If you're Lutheran, they're good with you. If you're Catholic, even Catholic, they're good with you. So they end up being very tolerant inside of their society. And this tolerance ends up being good for the economy. The Dutch end up creating a large merchant, middle-class society in which many people flourish. And they do it because people who have been shunned in other countries, like Spain, the Jews in Spain, or the Protestants in Spain, or the Protestants in the southern part of the Holy Roman Empire, end up moving to the end up moving to the Dutch Republic, and they bring with them their business know-how and their business. Remember, we talked about the Protestant work ethic. They bring that Protestant work ethic, and the Jewish population brings their work ethic, and they end up establishing this kind of really cool place where people are getting real wealthy. And between 1600 and 1650, the Netherlands is one of the most wealthy and powerful countries in the world, just for a short time until the English get pissed at them and go to war with them. Okay. Can you go back to the question highlighted in red? How did states exploit religious conflicts, and what did they gain? How did states? Yeah. Okay, what time is it, guys? I'm starting to roll right here. Okay, good. A few more minutes, guys. 1.3. 1.3.3c. 1.3.3c. Good. States exploited religious conflicts to promote political and economic. Yeah. All right. I'll go through this quickly. I kind of already talked about that. You know what? In fact, I kind of already talked about that. If you go back, if you missed the beginning, somebody asked a question, and I talked exactly about what Catholic Spain did to exploit the religious conflict. They exploit the 30 Years' War conflict in order to gain more power and more land. They're unsuccessful, so they don't actually do it. France exploits the 30 Years' War as well to weaken the Holy Roman Emperor, the Habsburg family, the Catholics, even though they're Catholic, and they're attempting to weaken that family in order to become stronger themselves. And they also get a piece of land that is a very valuable piece of land. It's got a lot of resources, good farmland, and it's called Aslas. It's a region inside of Spain. So that's one specific thing they gain. France did by entering this war on the sides of the Protestants to help them defeat the Holy Roman Empire. They got a big piece of land, which benefited them and made them a larger country and made them more economically potent, if you will. England entered the 80 Years' War on the side of the Protestants. Even though they are Protestants, they did it because they wanted to weaken Spain. And by weakening Spain and them getting stronger, then they would have more political and economic control of the seas, which would make them more powerful. So that's what they did. Denmark did the same thing in the 30 Years' War. Their objective is to help the Protestants stop the Catholics, but in stopping the Catholics, they hope to gain some land along the Baltic Sea. So if you guys will go to a map, check it out, you'll see where Denmark is. You'll see that they butt up against the Baltic Sea. They're just trying to enlarge their empire, and that's why they do it. They got in the religious war to become more politically larger country and more economically wealthy country. So I think I covered that before, though. Anabaptists. The Anabaptists are a religious sect of Protestants. They are very literal in the translation of the Bible. I think like the movie you guys watch with Tom Ritchie, where it says, like in the Bible, it says, hey, and they preach from the rooftops. They would actually go climb roofs, get on top of roofs, and preach a sermon from the rooftops. But because they took the Bible literally, everything in the Bible literally, they did some things that were pretty crazy. One thing they did in certain Anabaptists, not all, in certain Anabaptist communities, was the people that they had multiple wives, because in the Bible it talks. I'm not a Bible scholar. It's one of the people from the past had multiple wives, and if he had multiple wives, then that's what Christianity is or Catholicism is. We all should have multiple wives. So the Lutherans and the Catholics would be appalled at that. They also had this crazy. I know that separation of church and state is kind of really weird, but what the Anabaptists basically were saying is they did not need to be subordinate under the state law or political system. And that what they did in their own cities and their own communities, whether that was preaching from the rooftops, holding multiple lives, only, baptizing adults, they didn't have to follow the rules and regulations of that country or of that political entity, that region, or that ruler. Obviously, we know that Luther would disagree with this, right? Because he wrote that letter against the murdering horde of thieves and stuff, against the Protestants who had, against the peasants who had that revolt, saying, hey, I never told you guys to politically revolt. I said this was a spiritual and a religious thing. You know, God does not want you to revolt against these people, against these political rulers. So obviously Luther would disagree with the fact that these Anabaptists would not follow any of the rules or laws of a given country and or region, because they felt that they were following God's law, and that was way more important than the political law or the civil law of the day. So that created many problems for them. In fact, the Catholics and the Protestants hated them equally. And in a town, Munster, I believe it was, the Catholics and the Protestants stopped fighting each other, and they invaded the country, or the community, and killed them. So that's who the Anabaptists are. Roman Inquisition, I don't know. I don't know what it's an attempt by the Catholic Church to weed out heretics. I already told you what heretics were. Anybody who was against the church. So again, it's this idea that anybody who has any idea or any inkling that they might be Protestant, that they might be reading Luther's books, that they might, then that is an enemy of Catholicism. That's an enemy of the state. Those people must be found. We got to find them, and we got to weed them out. And so the way they go through that is the Inquisition. People, hey, I saw Crystal reading a book on Martin Luther. They must be Lutheran, and they must be Protestants, and they're just pretending to be Catholics. So the Inquisition would come to your house, grab you, take you, torture you, and say, who else is doing this? You're not alone. There's other people you know. What friends do you have? And they would torture you until you gave them names. And then they'd probably kill you. And then they would go get those people. So it was an instrument of terror to make sure that they didn't have any heretics in their communities. That's what the Inquisition essentially was. Don't worry about Poland, guys. It won't be in this test. Which 3 concepts are the most? All of them. You have to know all the concepts, guys, because I don't know what's going to be on the test in May. So I can't. All the concepts will not be covered on the test. I want to say 19 questions. You're going to have 50 minutes to answer 19, or 48 minutes to answer 19. That gives you about 2 minutes per. I think there's 6 stimuli or passages or pictures or paintings with either 3 to 4 questions. So yeah, you got to prepare for all of them. You need to know all of them. Significance of Poland, I already talked about that. Sorry, Hillary. Netherlands, we already talked about. That's the Spanish War. That's the important thing. The idea of religious pluralism, and the idea that they are an example of somebody who's, stopping Catholicism, if you will. Okay. Did we do it? All right, Jeb. I think that's it, man. That's all I got. You got any last question? I'll give you another few seconds here. All right, guys. So listen, remember, it is important that you go, hopefully you've had your deal there, and you go through and you don't, I gave you a bunch of words. I get that. If you know who those people are, that's wonderful. It is. It's great, but it's not the end all of anything. You need to be able to put those people in as examples of people and events that clarify each of the concepts. So remember, just go to the concept. Again, in 1.3.1c, the Catholic Reformation, you know what that is, exemplified. A good example was the Jesuits and the Council of Trent revived the church. How did they revive the church? How did they reform the church and make it better? But it also cemented divisions. In what ways did they say, screw you Protestants, we're not changing? So that's it. That's the affirmation versus the Reformation. And again, if you didn't watch that video, very little I can do for you, right? So again, that video was one that you should have watched. And these are just examples of the Reformation, how they changed it a little, and how they affirmed what they already did was right. Those are the examples. That's what you need to know. I would go through here, frankly. I mean, I would go through here. So the first concept is the word Erasmus. What does Erasmus write? We talked about it in class. It was in Praise of Folly. So if you haven't gone to like Spark Notes or any of those and like read the paragraph or two on what that is and the importance, or even looked it up on Wikipedia, you should have done that 2 weeks ago. Let's see. The second one, Martin Luther's name shows up. John Calvin's name shows up. Anabaptists. We talked about Martin Luther and the Anabaptists in this review here. John Calvin, again, he's what makes him different than everybody else. Hopefully you're like yelling right now, predestination. We talked about it. Again, these are things you read about, you answered, and we discussed in class. So again, indulgences, nepotism, simony, pluralism, those are just examples of new interpretations of, those are examples of the way these people criticized the church. So what were the new interpretations? Well, Martin Luther had 3 sacraments. John Calvin, predestination was a new interpretation of church doctrine. The Anabaptist, only adult baptism. I mean, seriously, if that's what you know, that's 98% chance going to be the question and the answer. I mean, might you get excerpt from the Index of Prohibited Books? Yep, because it's on our concept outline. Might you get an excerpt from the Peace of Augsburg or the Book of Common Prayer? Yep, it's in the concept outline. Might you get an excerpt? Might you get a excerpt from the Edict of Nantes? Yes, it's in the Concert out of Bologna. So the Peace of Augsburg, the Edict of Nantes. These are all things that those are the things that I would study, because those are the things that show up in the concept outline. All right. Let me go back one more time to the questions. Stands upon. Is there going to be no SAQ on the test, guys? We will actually have an SAQ test on the side at some point, probably in the next week or two, and it'll just be like one SAQ. I'll give you the question with an A, a B, and a C, or just the A with 2 parts and the B. So we'll just do that on our own. That won't be there. It's just multiple choice, nothing else. You don't have to worry about anything. The test in May is going to be multiple parts. There's going to be 55 multiple choice questions, but that's not 55 different pictures and excerpts from books or pamphlets or engravings. That's 55 questions. There'll probably be 3 to 4 questions per stimuli. So if you do the math, you're looking at about 12 different documents, 12, maybe 13 out of how many concepts are we doing? I mean, we're already at 20. So you got to figure by the time we're done with this, we'll be upwards of 180 concepts. They're going to ask you questions on about 12. And they don't tell me which ones I have to pay attention to. That just is what it is. We need to know them all. That's why, Simone, I couldn't bear a day. You study these 3. Can't do that because that's not going to happen in May. It is not going to help you. Okay, so it will be multiple choice. It'll be 4 SAQ questions. It'll be 1 DBQ, and it'll be 1 FRQ. That's the test in May. It's a 3.5, 4-hour test. You'll be taking it starting. You guys take it in the morning, I think. So you guys get off school that day. It's a Friday. I think you start at 8, and you're done at 12, and you get to go home. You don't even have to go to school that day. That's my gift to you. I know, I'm awesome. How many questions? 19 questions tomorrow. So I believe there are 5 stimuli. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 or 6. 5 or 6. So if you guys right now, look, there's 5 or 6 stimuli tomorrow. If you go right now and you look through this, the concept outline, what possibly could be on it? I mean, seriously, what could be on it? Could something from Martin Luther be on it? Like a document he wrote? Yep. That would be a great guess. 95 Thesis, perhaps. His pamphlet on the murdering and thieving horrors of the peasants when they revolted. He wrote a book we talked about in class. Boom, that could be on it. Let's see, John Calvin. Yeah, I don't know. We didn't talk about anything, but I don't know. Something he wrote might be on it. But do you need to know word for word what the 95 Thesis is? Nope. It's a critique of the church. That's it. What was he doing it against? The Catholic Church. What was he pissed at? Indulgences. Bam, that's it. That's it. Not much to it, man. Not much to it. So go through there. There's probably only like 12 or 13 documents or paintings or something that you might think would be on there. And guess what? I guarantee you 5 or 6 of them will be. All right. everybody thank, I'm done. I got to go to bed. I'm getting old. So everybody thank Jeb for doing this. I hope it was, in fact, I'm a little, you don't have to, don't make me feel good because I mean, I don't feel like I wasted my time, but could you guys get to Jeb real quickly and just give me an idea of if you felt, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Just give me an idea tomorrow when I see you, or we'll do it on Tuesday or whenever I see you next, about was this helpful? Is this something we should do in the future? Is there a better way to do this? So kind of brainstorm yourself those questions over the next couple days. And then when we get back together, we'll spend a good 5 or 10 minutes kind of debriefing this, because what I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to inundate you with information that you don't need. But at the same time, if this is beneficial, I'll be happy to do this more often than not, because I really want you guys to be successful. And I know this class is hard. I know there's a bunch of crap that's moving around in circles, and you're like, what the heck's going on in here? But if I can just get you guys to just pay attention to the concepts and just kind of know a little bit about the story that's happening and the context in which these events are happening, I think you guys will be fine. You're real smart kids. All right, guys. So thanks a lot, Jeb. I appreciate it, brother. You're awesome. You guys have a good night. We will see you tomorrow at the class. I know 5th period, we're going to be moving classes, so get there as soon as you can. 6th period as well. Spread the word that I need you guys there before the class starts. We're going to move classes that take the test in. All right, guys. Good night. Hope you guys had a great weekend, and I will, me and my glasses will see you tomorrow. God, I'm getting old. It's crazy. All right.